So, Father, we thank you for your wonderful grace to us. We thank you, Lord, that you are in control of our lives. We thank you that no matter what happens in this life, we can put our faith and our trust in you and see you bring us through. Holy Spirit, have your divine way in all of our lives. Teach us your grace, teach us your truth, teach us your word, help us to become better leaders, people who are more adept at being able to follow your orders and walk in line with you and your purposes. So bless our night together and teach us this evening. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your goodness, and we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to pull this up so that we can start watching our videos. And I need to share that. Okay, and so you do see the screen, I believe. Am I correct? Okay, and you should be able to hear once I get this pulled up. So we're on number, be sure you're taking notes. We just finished number 10, so we're on number 11, and the law of the inner circle. So take notes, we'll talk about it. And before we quit tonight, I'll talk a little bit about the exam, and it's that time already. Isn't that hard to believe? But let's go ahead and start.
The law of the inner circle. Law number 11 is the law of the inner circle. And the law of the inner circle says,
can you hear that?
A leader's potential is determined by those closest to you. Your potential and my potential is going to be determined by those closest to me. Teddy Roosevelt said in your notes, the best executive is one who has the sense enough to pick good men to do what he wants done and self-restraint enough to keep from meddling while they do it. Lou Holtz, who's a good buddy, one time said, John, here's the way it works in coaching football. If you've got a bad coach but a good players, you'll have a losing season. He said, if you have a good coach and bad players, you'll have a losing season. He said, if you have a good coach and good players, you'll have a winning season. He said, John, remember, it takes a good coach. In other words, it takes a good leader, and it takes good players. And a good leader is no substitute for a bunch of bad players. And a bunch of good players are no substitute for a bad leader. You got to have them both. Now, the law of the inner circle is one that I'm very passionate about. I want to do a good job of sharing this law with you. You see, I was 40 years of age, kind of not having a midlife crisis. I didn't have one. I didn't really have time for it. I was 40 years of age, and I began to ask myself this question. Why is it that I'm not achieving all that I want to achieve? I got in a couple days of really kind of melancholy. I was a little bit frustrated. The reason I was so frustrated was because I just hadn't hit all of my goals. And when I began to ask myself why I didn't hit my goals, I looked at myself and I knew I was very disciplined. I worked hard. I had some gifts in the areas that I was working. And I thought, by now I should be a lot better than I am. Then it hit me. The reason I wasn't hitting all my goals was because I didn't have a good team around me. That's when the law of inner circle really came to me. I formed this law at the age of 40 because all of a sudden I realized that if I was going to really reach my potential, I was going to have to reach my potential with people. Now, when I wrote the book, The 17 Laws of Teamwork, the first law of the law of teamwork is the law of significance. And the law of significance says one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. It's a great law. In other words, you can't do anything significant by yourself. So therefore, if you're one of these kind of people that likes being a self-made man, so once in a while people say, I'm a self-made man. They want me to congratulate them. I was looking at them and say, oh, that's too bad. I hate to hear that. Because if you've made everything yourself, you haven't made much. You see, the law of the inner circle says, if you really want to achieve great things, you've got to bring people around you. This inner circle around you, these key players, that really make a difference. And one of the things that's so exciting about team leadership, and one of the reasons I love teaching 21 laws is, as I've shared with you before, not everybody does all 21 laws well. And going back to an illustration I used on the law of navigating, if Chuck is a good navigator and I'm not a good navigator, team leadership begins to be huge. And what I need to do is I need to understand each one of my players and what their strengths are. And if this truly is my team, if this is my team, I'm going to tell you right now, this team is going to make me or they're going to break me. Isn't that true? Think about the people closest to you right now. They're either your greatest asset or your biggest liability. And every once in a while, the leaders say, man, I'm telling you right now, I can't get my team to come along, and they're not doing this. I mean, by the way, it's not anybody. Is it anybody that hit the ball and drag Charlie, hit the ball and drag Charlie, hit the ball and drag Charlie, hit the ball and drag? After a while, don't you just want to hit Charlie? Again, in the laws of teamwork, in the 17 laws of teamwork, one of the laws is the law of the chain. And the law of the chain says that the weakest link determines the strength of your team. You've got to have a team around you. You've got to have an inner circle. And the question I would ask you is a very simple question. Look at the 5 or 7. I'm not talking about everybody in your organization. I'm talking about everybody in your department. But look at the 5 or 6 key people. And ask yourself a very valid question. Are these people adding value to me? Or are they pulling me down? This is huge. Are they an asset? Or are they a liability? I've often said to your inner circle, they carry around the company, they carry around 2 buckets. One has water and one has gasoline. And a little fire problem, a spark of contention breaks out in your organization, your department or something, and they run over and they got these 2 buckets, one with water, one with gasoline. And how they use those buckets determine what kind of a problem you have when they're done. I mean, a lot of them will take that fire, that water, put it on that fire, and it all smolders out. It's a little puff of smoke, and it's dumping, and you get done, you say, oh my goodness, that was no big deal. Or haven't you had people in your inner circle? They took that bucket of gasoline, and they saw this little spark of fire. They threw that bucket of gasoline on, and when they got done, the city fire department was out. I've seen it happen many, many times. I would say this about your success as a leader. Your ability to have a good inner circle around you and your ability to train them and develop them is absolutely essential to your success. So let me share with you some inner circle commitments that you need to make. Let me share with you some commitments that you need to make as a leader to get your inner circle to where it needs to be. First of all, I would make this inner circle commitment to team leadership. No longer become or be the Lone Ranger. Say, I'm going to lead, but I'm going to lead with people. I'm not going to just lead people, I'm going to lead with people. I'm going to develop me a leadership team. And remember, as you develop your leadership team, as you develop your inner circle, they're not there to compete with you, they're there to complete you. They're here to make you better. And by the way, you're there to make them better. You should be adding value and completing them, just as they're adding value to you and they're completing you. Make a commitment, an inner circle commitment to team leadership. Secondly, evaluate your leadership team. Since the inner circle makes or breaks you, be honest in your evaluation of them. Look at them realistically. Assess them. Hold them accountable. You cannot afford to have people in your inner circle that aren't performing with excellence, that aren't giving it their best shot, that are kind of slacking on you. You can't afford that. You can't afford that to do your inner circle, and you can't afford to let them do that to you. So you've got to evaluate those people that are closest to you. And for years, I've used a grid in evaluation. It's a simple one. It doesn't need to be yours, but I'll just share it with you. It's in your notebooks. When I'm evaluating people to either come into my inner circle who are in my inner circle, I evaluate, first of all, what I call potential value. What is their potential? Many times these are people who have been able to raise themselves up, and they show great potential because if you can raise yourself up, you probably can raise others up also. I look, secondly, at positive value. Those who just lift and raise up the organization, the morale of the organization. Is it not true? Do you not know some people? Do you not know some people that they just come into the company and they just suck air out of everybody? You know what I'm talking about? You know, don't you? Aren't there just some people you just see them coming? They just open the door and you see them and they said, "Oh, they're coming to me. I'm about to give up energy. I'm about to feel what it's like when you're dying." And aren't there other people? They just walk in the room and your energy automatically goes up. Wow. I found out a long time ago there are two kinds of people in life: lifters and leaners. Wow. Lifters have the ability to just lift me up and help me to go to another level. And leaners, oh my goodness. You know, the leaning in the beginning isn't bad, but when it's after about 3 years, you say it's a lot of weight to carry. So I look at their potential value, I look at their positive value, I look at their personal value. I'm talking about myself now. I'm looking at what personal value are they to me. Can I look at their life and say, here is how my leadership is enriched because they are part of my life? I look fourthly at production value. Do they have the ability to raise up others? Do they have the ability to produce? And then the final evaluation for me is what I call proven value. Have they done it for so long that there is a trust element here now that they just always come through? I'm getting ready for a big assignment, and so yesterday I sat out with my assistant, Linda Eggers, and I kind of shared with her what I needed her to do. In fact, she's doing it right now in her office because it's a large assignment for a group of business people that I'm going to meet with for the next 2 days. Last night, I don't know, probably 9:30, she's over at my home office, and we're going through it one more time, and she says, "John, I not only have done what you've shown me," and she gets to me, but then she said, "I realized what you wanted to have accomplished with it," so she said, "I did it this way." And she just took what I had given her to a whole new level. And I said, "Linda, one more time, you just make me better than I am. One more time, Linda. One more time, as so many times. You've taken what I've given you, and you just made it better. And you're going to make me look so good, and you're going to allow me to help so many people because you are a key player on my inner circle, and you have proven value to me." Make inner circle commitments. Inner circle commitments such as, I'm going to have team leadership, and I'm going to evaluate my team. Another inner circle commitment I want you to make is that you're going to develop your leadership team. Make that commitment. I'm going to develop the people around me. I'm going to make sure that my leadership team grows. And here's why. If you grow your inner circle, you'll grow your business. Grow your people, grow your company. It always works that way. That's the law of the inner circle.
Okay, the law of the inner circle. We're going to try to move quickly today, but any questions or thoughts, comments you'd like to make on that? It is important who you have around you, because who you have around you is going to lift you up or draw or pull you down. Who you have around you is going to add value to what you're accomplishing, or they're going to decrease the value. And so the law of the inner circle, we have to be sure that we surround ourselves with the right kind of people. And that's not always easy. In fact, sometimes to do that, at the beginning, you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, wiser than you are, and you can grow from their input. So the law of the inner circle is a powerful law. If no one has anything to ask, we'll just go on to the next one, the law of empowerment.
Law number 12. The law of empowerment. And the law of empowerment says only secure leaders give power to others. Only Only secure leaders give power to others. In your notes, the people's capacity to achieve is determined by their leaders' willingness and ability to empower. Let me illustrate. Every year, I spend time with my nonprofit organization, Equip, traveling internationally. And as I travel to many countries, I teach thousands upon thousands of leaders. What I have noticed, especially in developing countries around the world, is I've noticed that the person in power, the person that has a leadership position, instead of empowering others, and instead of sharing with others, and instead of including others and developing a leadership team, the person in leadership position, instead of raising up people, in developing countries, most often, they try to push down people. Let me illustrate. Come on up here for a moment. My name's John. What's your name? David, come on up here for a second. Let me just illustrate this with David. By the way, David, I wanted to pick out somebody good looking.
I'm gonna sit down.
No. No. I just looked at us. I gotta get a good looking guy. It's okay. Now, what's this, David? What I found is too many leaders, and by the way, I don't stop here, but not only in developing countries, in America, I see this happen all the time. Leaders who have power and have position, taking somebody like David. Let's say I'm the leader, I got the power, I got the position. Here's what I see happening all the time, where we take them and we try to push them down. Okay, come on, David, cooperate here.
Sorry.
David's theme song is "I Shall Not Be Moved." So these leaders, they push them down. You follow me? And their whole thing is, I gotta keep pushing my people down. I gotta push them down. By the way, have you noticed something? While I'm pushing David down, what's happening to me? I'm going down with him. That's the way it always works, friend. Listen, if you're a leader and you push people down, you just go down.
That's right.
It's only a matter of time. Just as if I take David and I start developing him and I say, I'm going to lift him up and I'm going to get him up to a higher level. Now, notice now what happened? When I start lifting David up, what happens? I go up with him. Here's what I want you to understand as a leader. You either go up with your people or you go down with your people. And this idea of somehow, I'm going to protect my position, I'm going to push people down. What we don't realize is it eventually is our downfall also. By the way, thanks, David.
Thank
You did a great job, didn't he? Huh? Give him a hand. He did a great job. Okay, now. David, you and I have been practicing that for months, and boy, it worked out really well. Okay. So you ask yourself the question. I ask myself this question all the time. Again, when I travel and I see this happening in other countries, I ask myself, why is it that the leader insists on somehow being way above his or her people and always is trying to kind of keep everybody, I don't know, they have this kind of like, I don't know, the best way I explain it, almost like a king of the hill mentality. I got to be on top. Why is it that people fail to empower people and give them the energy and the permission and the environment that will help them to be growing and be great leaders themselves? I think there are several reasons we need to discuss quickly. One of the reasons I think we fail as leaders to empower others is insecurity. You show me an insecure leader and I'll show you somebody that will never empower anybody. In fact, let me tell you what's never happened. An insecure leader has never empowered anyone because they're too insecure. They're afraid that somebody else will get their job. What happens if I give somebody a little bit of empowerment and they do a better job than me? Whoa! And that insecurity constantly causes leaders to keep pushing people down. Let me just say this, then I'll flip off real quickly, because I'll start to show my bias, and I don't want to do that. One of the worst days of your life is to be in any organization where you have to follow an insecure leader. Trust me. It's like walking handcuffed through a landmine. It's only a matter of time till they'll blow you and them up together. Insecurity. Insecure leaders do not empower other people. Another reason I think we fail to empower others is a desire for job security. I do know people who I don't think they're insecure, they just want to keep their job. They said, well, I don't know if I want to train and empower somebody. They may take my job away from me. Now, what I've always taught, especially in my inner circle, who I've taught all to be leaders, I've always told them it's their job to work themselves out of a job. My thing is equip and train people to take your job. And let me tell you something. If you equip somebody to take your job and you train them, here's the way this works. If you work your way out of a job, I'll give you another. I've had key inner circle members that have had 7 or 8 positions in a period of maybe 13, 14 years with me. I mean, they've gone from this one to another because they train and empower, and then they've done that, so they don't need to run that, so they go and run another area. I have a wonderful friend of mine who's been with me for over 20 years, Dan Robin. Literally, that man, I bet you he has worked himself out of at least a dozen jobs in 20 plus years of being with me. You know what I say to my staff is, you work yourself out of a job, I'll give you another. In fact, here's the way it works with me. If you can't work yourself out of a job, you're smart, aren't you? I'll take the one away from you. You'll lose the job if you can't train someone else to do the job. But I think sometimes we just don't want anybody else to take our job. Another reason I think we fail to empower people is a bad experience. In other words, I'll bet everyone in the studio, and I'll bet everyone listening to this leadership training tape, I'll bet every one of us have had a time where we've trained somebody. I mean, you worked hard, you poured your life into them, you trained them, and then it turned out bad. They didn't do a good, they left the company, they left you, they hurt you, they backstabbed you, they did all kind of, how many of you have ever had a bad experience trying to train someone? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah, 100% in the studio. How many of you are sitting beside that person today? Now, see, you've learned. Now your hand doesn't go up anymore. You know better. You know better. Now, a lot of times, just a bad experience. I've had that happen to me. I can remember as a young leader taking a very promising young guy, younger than me. I was already in my 20s, so he was really young. And pouring my life into him for about 3 years, and only to have him just mess up. And I remember I said to myself, I'm never going to do this again. I am never going to do this again. I'm done training people. In fact, I thought, when I hire people from now on, instead of pouring my life into them, I'm going to keep them at a distance. And for the next 6 months, when I brought a couple people on my staff, I kept at a distance. And one day I realized that if you don't allow a person to get close to you, if you don't pour your life into them, the good news is they probably won't hurt you. But the bad news is they'll never help you. They'll never be able to come alongside of you, truly alliance and partner with you. But a bad experience. A lot of times we just have bad experiences. Say, I'm never going to do that again. And so therefore, we fail to empower people. Number 4, ego. Just ego. Just the fact, hey, a lot of times we don't empower anybody because we want all the credit. Isn't that true? Yeah, we think, my goodness, I empower this team. They're going to get some of the credit. I'd like to have it all. Hello. Huh. Number 5, codependency. I think sometimes we are codependent with others. In other words, basically what we're saying is I need you and I want to keep you close to it. If I empower you, I might free you up to let you go. And I put in there because it's a true statement. You can't lead people if you need people. Now, don't take that statement to the extreme. Don't go back and say, boy, I don't even like people. This is awesome. I have the first quality of being a great leader. No. If you need them, and the reason you can't lead them if you need them is if you truly need them in a codependent way, you'll never make the hard decision because you need their approval too much. By the way, as I close out the law of empowerment, I just want to say to you that this has been a law that has been very important to me since I've turned 50 and now much older. I've come to the conclusion for me, now this is just for me, that my greatest joy and my greatest fulfillment is in adding value to others. And I can say at this stage of my life, other people's success brings me more joy than my own success. And I don't mean that wrong because I still like to hit the ball out of the park. And every once in a while I get the chance to hit the ball out of the park. But to train and teach someone else to do that, it's a greater joy. You know what? I kind of know what I could do. But when I pour my life into others and I see what they can do, it begins to compound as far as the return. It begins to, instead of to add, it begins to multiply. And so I kind of close this law by saying that I have found that adding value to people is very important to me. And I basically try to guide my life so that every day I can positively take people to another level. And I found 3 things about adding value to people that is just absolutely huge. And the first thing I found about adding value to people is this: that you can only add value to people if you truly value people. If I don't value you as a leader, I'll manipulate you instead of motivate you. It's never right. So the only way that I can ever add value to you is truly value you. And secondly, I only can add value to people when I know and relate to what they value. I've got to know and relate to what they value, because I can't add value to them if I'm on a different page. I've got to know what their interests are and what their goals and mission and passion is. Those are important. So I can only add value to you if I know and relate to what you value. And thirdly, I can only add value to you and to others when I make myself more valuable. In other words, I've got to keep growing. Because if I don't keep growing, I cannot pass on to you what I'm learning. Because you cannot give what you do not have. So how do I stretch you? By stretching myself first. How do I add value to you? By adding value to myself first. How do I grow you? By growing myself first. By making myself more valuable, then I can add value to you. And that's what the law of empowerment is all about. Taking people to a higher level than they would have ever gone on their own. But because you willed it and gave permission to it, you empower them.
Okay. Great law. Any thoughts? Any questions? Let me go over a couple of the things that he highlight a couple of things he said. Only secure leaders give power to others. I find that there's a lot of insecure leaders. They act secure in their persona, but when you see the way they operate and the way they do not empower and the way they try to press people down, the way they try to rise above and get all the kudos and don't give credit to people on their staff, etc., they're very insecure. And only secure leaders give power to others. Why? Secure leaders know who they are. And they know that their identity is not in what they do and in what they accomplish, but their identity is in who they are. And so he said insecurity will never empower anyone. Why? They don't want to lose their job. They don't want somebody to do it better than they do. And you can't lead people if you need people. That's a powerful statement. You can't lead people if you need people. Why? Because you're always afraid to really lead them, because you're afraid that if you do, they're going to get upset and they're going to go somewhere else. And so some great thoughts. Any questions, any comments?
That last one, you can't lead people. I'm going to forget exactly what I was going to say, Dr. Cook.
You can't lead people if you need people?
Yeah, but I can't remember what I was going to say about it.
I've done that before. Lots of times, about 10 times a day.
Oh, that's what it is, because you're afraid of how they're going to feel. I've had experiences in my past, like where I was so afraid, even in marriage, actually. Sometimes I'm so afraid to hurt my wife's feelings that I won't make the hard call. Or does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's caused me to be a horrible leader. I know it. Being worried about everybody else's opinion,
Right.
has caused me to put that.
Yeah.
So.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, let's Let's go to number 13, the law of the picture, or the law of reproduction.
Law number 13, the law of reproduction. The law of reproduction says we teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. And I'm going to talk to you in this law about reproducing what you are. Now, isn't this interesting? This is a cousin. The law of reproduction is a cousin to the law of magnetism. Remember, the law of magnetism says who you are is who you attract. Now we're saying the law of reproduction, it takes a leader to raise up a leader. Now, the law of magnetism is kind of like the front end. The law of magnetism says, here's how you draw potential leaders to you. The law of reproduction is the back end. The law of reproduction says, once you've drawn these potential leaders, here's how you develop these potential leaders. We're going to begin talking now, and as you go through the laws of leadership with me, one thing you're going to realize is that as we get closer to the end of the laws, we get more into reproducing ourselves. The first laws deal with how do I develop myself and how do I become the person I should be, those kind of things. And then we begin to shift from me as a leader to how effective I am as a leader to reproduce other people within my life. Here's what I know. We teach what we know. We reproduce what we are. It takes a leader to know a leader. What I've observed is that leaders can pick out potential leaders better than non-leaders. Are you with me? Because they have an understanding of what it's like to be a leader. So it takes a leader to know a leader. Secondly, it takes a leader to show a leader. In other words, it takes a leader not only to be able to know one or to find one, and so therefore the people that find potential leaders are leaders themselves, but it also takes one to model or to show or to be an example for another leader, because the greatest motivational principle in life is people do what people see. So if you're a leader, guess what? You can teach leadership to others. That's why it's impossible for non-leaders to raise up leaders. It's impossible for non-leaders to train leaders. A lot of times I'm asked the question that why is not leadership taught more in the educational, academic, college type of setting? And the reason I say that is because there aren't a lot of leaders there. And if you can teach a leadership course, but if you're not a leader, you can't reproduce leaders. It takes one to know one. It takes one to show one. And finally, it takes one to grow one. How do you grow potential leaders? By being one yourself. People do what people see. So in this law, I want to talk to you about reproducing leaders. I did a survey about 2 years ago that was very important. I asked, I was doing leadership conferences, and I asked leaders all over the country, I asked them this question. I said, what's the number one influence on your leadership life? In other words, if you could go back and say, I am a leader because, and fill out the blank, what would you say? 5% of the people that said, I am a leader because, said, I am a leader because of a crisis. In other words, something happened that somebody needed to lead, and they happened to be there, and because they had leadership intuitiveness, leadership leanings within them, they rose up, took the challenge, led, saw that they could lead, and pretty soon kind of became the leader of the pack. So about 5% said they became a leader because of a crisis. 10% said they became a leader because they had what they called natural leadership gifts. They had the leadership leanings that I'm talking about. Now, here's what's interesting. 85% of the people that I talked to in the conference and did the survey with on how and why did you become a leader said, I became a leader because another leader put me under their wing and mentored me. In other words, they came into contact with another leader, which goes back to the law of reproduction, and the law of reproduction says it's an absolute fact that it takes a leader to reproduce a leader, it takes a leader to know a leader, it takes a leader to grow a leader, it takes a leader to show a leader, it takes all those things. Leaders beget leaders. Now, here's the question. If leaders beget leaders, then why is it that I have come to the conclusion that only about 5% of the leaders reproduce other leaders? Because I've watched this happen. I've seen leaders who never reproduce other leaders. What most leaders do is they just have followers. They lead and people follow. Why is it that so few leaders empower other leaders, reproduce other leaders, develop other leaders, raise people up higher than themselves? Well, there are several reasons. Number one is they're insecure. Again, insecurity keeps us from empowering people. Number two, they spend too much time with followers. They just spend way too much time with them. And a lot of times they spend time with them because, let me just stop here for a moment. You know what followers do versus lead? If you lead followers, they'll stroke your ego all the time. They'll tell you how good you are. And you'll believe that foolishness. You know what I mean? And they'll say, oh my, I couldn't make it without you. And oh, you believe all that, you know. And followers just stroke your ego all day. Leaders won't do that. Leaders are restless. They're saying, you know, you're doing a good job leading, but can we hurry it up a little bit more? Could we take on a bigger challenge? When are we going to? I mean, leaders following leaders, their main goal isn't to thrill you. Their main goal is progress, success. They want to get to the top. Thirdly, this is so true. Followers are easier to find and lead than leaders. Boy, isn't that the truth? One of the reasons we have so many followers is because we like it, because followers just follow. I mean, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They just kind of get in line. You see, leaders, hey, they're hard to find. Oh, they're hard to find. They don't flock. Turkeys flock. Eagles don't fly. You've never gone outside and said, oh my goodness, I couldn't even see the sun today. There was just thousands of eagles just blocking the sun. Yeah. Eagles don't fly. Turkeys fly. They're hard to find. They're not only hard to find, they're hard to gather. When you find them, they're not waiting to join your team. One of the best advice I ever received in trying to recruit good people to my team was this advice. Find somebody that is already fulfilled in a job that they're doing with excellence and go after them. The person who wants a job, you don't want. The person who's looking for something is not the one you want. Hello. There's a reason why they're at the depot waiting for the train to come. Being available is not a qualification. So they're hard to find. When I say they're hard to gather, because, you know, when you ask a leader to join your team, they don't just say, oh, thank God, I've been waiting for a team to join. No, they ask questions. They say, where are you going? How long are you going to be there? What's it cost? Can I drive? They're hard to find, they're hard to gather, and they're hard to keep because they're restless. And if you're not going somewhere, as soon as the train slows down, they're off. It's very important in being able to reproduce leaders, by the way, that you be able to find potential leaders, because your greatest odds of reproducing a leader is to finding a potential leader. Think about it for a moment. If you got two people in your organization, one's a potential leader, I mean, they've got some potential leadership gifts, and the other person has no leadership gifts. Wow, you want to spend your time with the person that has potential leadership gifts. So you have to know how to see them. You got to know how to find them. You see, when I go to the airport, there are two kind of people that pick me up. If they don't know who I am and they have never seen me before, there are two kind of people who pick me up at the airport. The first kind of person, they just take a piece of paper and they put my name on top. And they stand somewhere where, you know, where you do play. They're standing over there on the other side of the hallway, and they got my name in the air. And they're just hoping I see their name. They just got, you know, they're talking to their buddy. They got their name in the air. The other day I was in the airport. Somebody said they had a name in the air. I didn't see my name in the air. I passed them, went right on to the hotel without it. They panicked, called me an hour later. Oh, you're here. Oh, thank God you're here. See, if all you do is stick a leader's name in the air and hope, you miss a lot of leaders. But there's another way to find leaders. Some people, when they come to the airport, they have one of my books. And they go to the back of the book, and it's got my picture. Hopefully it's a newer book. And they've got my picture. And you know what? They're by the line where the people are playing, and they got this picture of me. And they know what I look like because they got my picture. And everybody comes up and does this number. You're John Maxwell. They come up and they shake my hand. How do you know I'm John Maxwell? It's very simple. It was easy to find you because I had a picture of what you look like. That's huge. You see, if you have a picture of what a leader looks like, you can find potential leaders. If you can find potential leaders, you increase your odds of reproducing potential leaders. Number 4, sometimes we don't develop other leaders because they fail to recognize the value of developing leaders. They've never realized the compounding value that if you develop leaders, you grow your company, your profit, your bottom line is bigger. Everything wins when you have leaders in your organization. Number 5, leadership has been viewed many times as a competitive effort and not a cooperative one. So many times we've looked at people and thought of them as competitors. And you know where I think we got that? I don't know, this is just me. I think we got that from when we were kids. How many of you when you were kids played the game Follow the Leader? Oh, I played that game. And you know what the goal of the leader was? The goal of the leader was to do things that the followers couldn't do so that the leader could stay the leader. So I grew up in a culture that said, if you're really good, people will never be as good as you. And therefore, you get a lead. And so therefore, I protected leadership by being able to do things that others couldn't do. And I think it puts within us a competitive nature that we don't even understand. And as we grow up, we carry that over into even the corporate world in our life. I said, I still got to be able to do things that other people can't do, so I'll establish myself as the leader.
Okay. The law of reproduction, or another way of saying it is the law of the picture. So any thoughts, any questions? No? Some good stuff. It takes leaders to raise up a leader. Why? The law of the lid. Right? You can't raise up a leader if you're not one yourself. Okay? People do what they see. We teach what we know. We reproduce what we are. And then his points of why leaders don't reproduce leaders. Insecurity. They need their egos stroked. Followers are easier to find and lead. Boy, that's the truth. They fail to recognize the value of developing leaders. And leadership has been viewed as competitive rather than cooperative. And a lot of times people view leaders as being competitive, when in reality, yes, they can be. But not necessarily, because sometimes they're not being competitive, they're just being a leader. It's just who they are. It's just the way they think. It's the way they operate. Like he was saying, they're not interested in following. When you ask them to go with you, they say, where are you going? How long are you going to be there? Like he said, can I drive? Because they've got that natural born drive on the inside of them. Any questions? Any thoughts?
I thought it was pretty interesting how he was talking about the statistics about that people who come to the leadership conferences, that 85% of them had a mentor or leaders pouring into them from above them. I thought that was pretty significant.
It is significant.
I've heard you say it at least 2 or 3 times about, we need to get somebody to pour into us that's older and wiser. I just thought that was pretty significant. Yeah.
Anyone on Zoom have any? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah. So on number 3 there, followers are easier to find. He said something, I kind of wrote it down, but I wrote it real fast. Find somebody already fulfilling a job. Now, what's the ethics in church leadership kind of going after somebody that's already in a position at another church, on staff somewhere that's happy, is that considered ethical? Where do you draw the line there?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially since the next class is ministerial ethics, right? I don't, knowing Maxwell, I'm sure he wasn't saying you go after the guy down the street. And I'm sure he's not even saying you just go after somebody at a church across the nation without first talking with that person's senior leader. There's a way of going to that person's senior leader and saying, I see you've got John Doe here, and he's up and coming and he's rising, and I've got a place for him. Would you be opposed to me approaching him? Or would you, if you're not opposed to it, would you like to approach him with me? Because real leaders are never trying to keep other leaders. They're trying to release leaders. So there is an ethical and an unethical way to do it.
Okay.
So very good question. Very good question. We should never just go after people that someone else has without at least doing it right. Okay. And the right way would be to go to their leader and talk to them first. And if their leader said, no, I don't want you to approach him, then you don't approach him, But good point. Good point. Anyone else? Okay, one more here.
The 14th law of leadership is the law of buy-in. B-U-Y. Buy-in. The law of buy-in says people buy into the leader, then the vision. When I hold leadership conferences many times, a leader of an organization will come up to me and they'll say, John, I've got this huge vision, got this big dream, just about to share it with my company, about to share it with my department. And they'll ask me the question, all the time they'll ask me this question, what do you think? Do you think that my people will buy into my dream? Whenever they ask me the question, I say, let me ask you a question. Have the people bought into you?
That's right.
Because if the people have bought into you as a leader, can I tell you something? There's good news. They'll buy into the dream. But if they haven't bought into you, can I tell you, they'll not buy into the dream. It's never happened where an organization has bought into the vision without buying into the visionary. So the first thing that you sell is not your dream. The first thing you sell is not the vision you have. The first thing you sell is yourself. Because when you can connect, goes back to the law of connection. When you can touch a heart, you can ask for the hand. In other words, when you can touch them relationally, when they have bought into you emotionally, when they like you, when you're at least on level number 2 on the 5 levels of leadership, when they have bought into you, then they'll buy into the dream. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to always sell yourself. And then you can sell your dream. But it's impossible to sell your dream if you haven't first sold yourself. You see, every vision is filtered through the messenger. So therefore, when I hear a vision or when I have a dream presented to me as a leader, it's an absolute fact that every one of those dreams and visions are filtered through who gives the dream and who shares the vision. I've often said it this way. The leader finds the dream and then the people. That's the way it works. As a leader, I have a vision or I dream, and I got this vision dream, and I say, okay, I've got to go find some people to fulfill it because I can't do it on myself because it's a bigger dream than I have. So the leader finds the dream and then the people. The people find the leader and then the dream. Most people go throughout life without the dream or the vision. So they have to find the leader that has a dream or a vision that's compatible with them. But in staying long enough to find out what the leader's dream is and what the vision of that leader is and where that leader is taking them, they also realize, I've got to buy into this person. I've got to like them. If I'm going to take a journey with them, I've got to relate to them. I've got to connect with them. They have to like me. They have to believe in me. They have to relate and connect with me. So the law of buy-in is absolutely huge because what we have to understand is that our job as a leader isn't to sell the dream first. Our job as a leader is to sell ourselves first. And with the selling of ourselves and the connecting with people, they connect with the dream. Again, how do I take the vision from me to we? The law of buy-in. If they buy into you, it will soon be their vision not just your vision. You know, there are some questions, therefore, that I have to ask as a leader. The question is not only do I have a clear vision, the question that I need to ask is, do I love my people? Do I enjoy being around them? Do I have a good relationship with them? Do they love me? Do they enjoy being around me? Is it a good time when we're together? Because the leader, again, understands in the law of buy-in, there has to be the human connection before you can take them to a higher level. What I want to do to make this lesson real practical for you is I have what I call the buy-in process that I want to give you. I want to share with you what is the process that helps people buy into you as a leader and then buy into your vision. Here's where it starts. Number one, the people see the problem. In other words, there's a need that people sense and feel and understand, and they say, oh my goodness, we have a need or we have a problem. That's the first step to the buy-in process. There's just what I call the obvious need or the obvious problem. Step one. Step two, the leader sees the problem and the potential. Now that's what distinguishes the leader from the follower. The follower sees the problem. In fact, the follower is frustrated and basically has no answers and basically thinks that his or her hands are tied, and so they're frustrated with the problem, but the leader sees the problem, but the leader also sees the potential. That's what makes a leader. Remember, leaders are dealers in hope. Where most people see the dead end street, they see more than the dead end street. So, one is the obvious need that there's a problem. Secondly, there's a leader who sees not only the problem, but the potential. Third, the leader has a plan. Now, this plan usually is a vision, but it's a plan. They not only see the problem, but they've got a plan on how to fix it. And in seeing this problem and seeing this plan how to fix it, remember, now they are beginning to be what I call tangible dealers in hope. It's one thing just to get up and say, it's going to be a better day. It's another thing to get up and say, it's going to be a better day, and here's why, and lay out a plan. One statement gives people hope for the moment. The second statement energizes and empowers them for the long run. So, there's a problem that's obvious. There's a leader who sees the problem, but also sees the potential. And that same leader, thirdly, develops a plan how this problem can be solved. Number four, the leader believes in the people. As we studied in the law of buy-in, that you have to buy into the people before you buy into the vision. And by the way, that's two ways. The people have to buy into the leader before they buy into the vision, and the leader has to buy into the people before he or she can get them to buy into the vision. So there's a buy-in on both sides. So this leader not only sees the problem, sees the potential, has the plan, but has bought into the people, which brings us to step number 5. The leader believes in the future. Not only does the leader believe in the people, the leader believes in the future, and basically, again, has great expectation of what tomorrow will bring. And step number 6. The leader shares this belief with the people. In other words, the leader gathers people around and says, let me tell you what I think can happen. Here's the plan. Here's what I believe is going to happen. Which brings us to step number 7. The people believe in the leader's belief. I've seen this happen time and time again. The people believe in the leader's belief. Even before, quote, they get it, they've got it. They've bought in emotionally to the leader, and so therefore, as they've bought emotionally into the leader, they begin to buy into emotionally the leader's plan, the whole process. Now, when those 7 things happen, the 8th thing is absolutely automatic. The people buy in to the leader. They just buy into the leader. Now, sometimes this gets to the law of respect, because the law of buy-in is a cousin to the law of respect. They're similar laws. They're different, One is based on emotional understanding and relationships. That's the law of buy-in. The law of respect is based on credibility and the ability to produce. So they're different, but they're cousins. Now, here's what I know. I can remember I was a leader of an organization several years ago, of which I followed an excellent leader who had been in that position for 27 years. You talk about taking time before people gave you respect or buy-in. For the first year and a half, all I heard was how good the last leader was. And you know what? He was that good. Instead of being jealous or instead of trying to pull him in, I bought into his leadership and talked about how good of a leader he was and how valuable he was to the organization. But I just kept doing my job with excellence. What I found was this. Almost 2 years later, I began to sense the law of buy-in. Now, nobody got up one day and said, oh, by the way, Chuck, law number 14, the law of the buy-in. There was no such law back then. I hadn't written the book. But I knew they began to buy into me. I knew they began to buy into me because they started coming to me and asking for leadership counsel. They began to initiate questions. And they also began to initiate affirmation. They began to talk to me about how I was helping them and how they realized where the organization was. And now the organization was so much better. And all of a sudden I realized when you truly have the law of buy-in as a leader, you don't need to ask the people. They'll start coming forward. And they'll start giving you that buy-in. You'll know it because the people will share it.
Okay, very good. Questions, comments? Anything strike you there? Basically, the law of buy-in, people buy into the leader, then the vision. And the first thing you sell is yourself. Okay? And we need to realize, a lot of times we want them to buy into our vision when we've not worked the process for them to buy into us first. And so it's a powerful truth. What I want to do is I want us just to go, we're not going to stop between the next ones, so we can get as many in as we can tonight. You can use the restroom, take a quick break if you need to while we're teaching. But let's just keep right on going, because some of these next ones are very, very important, and I want to get through as many as we possibly can. So let me let's just keep going here and go into the law of victory, which is the next one.
3 says, leaders find a way for the team to win. In other words, leaders have the ability to bring victory to the people. In your notes, I have this statement: victorious leaders find the alternative to winning unacceptable. So they find out what needs to be done to achieve victory. And then they go after it with everything at their disposal. Now, if you'll let me just use a sports illustration just for a second. Classic example of somebody that understood the law of victory was Michael Jordan. He just had the ability to bring the team to victory. And even when he went over to the Washington team in the NBA, a team that had been lowly, they almost made the playoffs. Why? Because anything less than victory is unacceptable to Michael Jordan. You show me a person, a leader that does this law well, and I'll show you a person that absolutely hates losing. As I've looked at the great leaders in history, they all excelled in this law. Whether it's in our country, George Washington, who absolutely is determined to allow our country to be free from British rule, and stakes his life in 6 years never hardly goes home to stay out there with his soldiers as they are undermanned and underrated to make sure that they bring this victory home, and finally he does. Whether it's a George Washington or an Abraham Lincoln who knows that the bloodiest time in our history is going to be a civil war, but he's willing to go through those dark hours so that we can eventually take this injustice off of our African American and friends and bring us to a new day. All of the great leaders understand and bring forth the law of victory. Perhaps my favorite leader of all is the leader of England, Winston Churchill, during World War II, who absolutely refused to allow the Nazis to gain control of Europe. And in the darkest hours, spoke great words of victory to his people. I love the statement I have in your notes about him. Winston Churchill asked the question, what is our aim? I answer in one word, victory. Victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, victory however long and hard the road may be, for without victory there is no survival. So, what does the law of victory look like? Let's put a picture on it so we can understand it. Let's make the law of victory tangible. First of all, leadership is responsible.
That's right.
You show me a leader that brings his or her team to victory, and I'll show you a leader that takes responsibility. They take responsibility when defeat happens. They say, look, it was my problem. I was the leader. So the first part or component of the law of victory in leadership is that the leader takes responsibility. No excuses. Boy, don't you know some people? Every time there's a problem, they got 17 reasons why it's not them. Huh? If and but and if and but. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. The other day, I love this. I picked this up. This is just some true explanations why people had automobile accidents, as reported to the police when they were doing the report. And some of these excuses just cracked me up. Such as this person said, as I reached an intersection, a hedge sprang up. Hedges will do that often, obscuring my vision. Wasn't my fault. The hedge grew fast. An invisible car came out of nowhere, struck my car and vanished. The telephone pole was approaching fast. Those moving telephone poles do it every time. I attempted to swerve out of its path when it struck my front end. I hate it when telephone poles do that. The indirect cause of this accident was a little guy in a small car with a big mouth. I had been driving my car for 4 years when I fell asleep at the wheel and had an accident. After 4 years, you'll do that. I was on my way to the doctors with rear end trouble when my universal joint gave way, causing me to have an accident. To avoid hitting the bumper of the car in front, I struck the pedestrian. Makes perfect sense to me. I was coming home, pulled into the wrong driveway, and hit a tree that I did not have. The pedestrian had no idea which direction to run, so I ran over him. Make up your mind. Make up your mind. The guy was all over the road, and I had to swerve a number of times before hitting him. This was not easy. This was not easy. I pulled away at the side of the road, glanced at my mother-in-law, and headed over the embankment. That's probably the only one that wasn't an excuse. Now, it's just simple. The law of victory says leaders take responsibility.
That's right.
Own up. The second thing the law of victory looks like is losing is unacceptable. Losing is just not acceptable. Thirdly, passion is unquenchable. You show me a person in the law of victory, and I'll show you a person that is passionate about winning. Creativity is essential. Why? Because you're going to have to constantly be creative to work yourself out of messes to bring victory. The victory is not an escalator to the top. Quitting is unthinkable. They will not quit. Commitment is unquestionable. And because of those preceding things, victory is inevitable. That's just a fact.
That's right.
I'm very fortunate because I have people around me who understand this law very well. And in my inner circle, they really do understand the law of victory. David Sutherland, who's the president of Enjoy Stewardship Services, that's an organization that raises money for nonprofit organizations. David, I many times go to him and I say, David, of all the people I know, you are Mr. Law of Victory. You just don't allow my team to lose. You don't allow my company to lose. You're going to make it happen. And I knew he was the Law of Victory when I brought him into my organization. It was very, very small. And it was right after Thanksgiving. I was over at the office one day and I saw his wife, Roxanne, and I noticed Dave was gone. I said, Roxanne, where's Dave? Well, he said, no, John, his goal was X amount of contracts this year, and he's 7 contracts short. So on Thanksgiving Day, he left and said, I hope to be home for Christmas. But I won't be home till I have the other 7 contracts. So Roxanne said, I'm not sure we're going to be home. But when he comes home, he'll have the contract. He came home 2 days before Christmas. All 7 of them signed. You see, Dave's a leader that isn't going to allow the team to lose. He just is not going to allow the team to lose. Kevin Small, who's the president of Enjoy, we got ready to put together a major leadership simulcast all over America with some of the major players such as Jack Welch and Rudy Giuliani and that whole process. And I can remember the day that Kevin came to us and said, I want to do this simulcast. And my brother and I looked at him and said, well, it's going to take a lot of money and we're going to have to probably have a cash flow issue. And the only way we're going to let you do that is if you go out. And we threw out, we said, you're just going to have to get leaders like Jack Welch or Rudy Giuliani for us to do this simulcast because you're just going to have to make it so great that everybody's going to want to watch it. And he disappeared. And I went to his assistant. I said, where's Kevin? She said, he went after Jack Welch and Rudy Giuliani. He said he would be back when he had him. 8 days later, he came back with signed contracts. Jack Welch, Rudy Giuliani, and an all-star team of linemen. You see, Kevin understands. He understands the law of victory. It's just a very simple law. It's a law that basically says, if you're a leader, you realize your responsibility isn't to get across the line first. Your responsibility is to take everybody that's on your team across the line. You see, the law of victory is not an individual award. The law of victory is not an individual trophy. It basically says because you got across the line and helped everybody else get across the line, you took everybody on your team to a higher level. The law of victory says, yes, you won, but so did all the players around you. The law of victory can probably be expressed best in the words of Bill Russell, who said after every basketball game with the Boston Celtics, which he led to many world championships, he said after every game, I evaluate my game, not based on how well I played, I evaluate my game on how well the players around me played, because he said my main job is to make them all just a little bit better. So the law of victory is not a single award for a single person doing a single job. No, no, no. You see, you're a leader. Leaders don't go to the top by themselves. Oh, they go to the top. But when they go to the top, they're like my friend Jim Winiker, who took 20 people to the top of Mount Everest. He said, the greatest joy is not getting there myself. Once I did it, I knew I could do it. Now the question is, can I bring victory to everybody else? That's the law of victory. Law number 16 is the law of the Big Mo.
A very
The law of the
important
Big
one
Mo
here.
says momentum is a leader's best friend. I have found this to be very true. In fact, with momentum, here's what I have found. With momentum, you can solve problems so much easier than if you don't have momentum. So let's talk about it for a moment and grab hold of your notes for a moment, and I'll walk you through some fill-in-the-blank stuff, then I want to do some teaching. First of all, many times the only difference between winning and losing is momentum. Let's understand what momentum will do for you. Just as the law of intuition gets a leader started quicker so that that leader can win the race, the law of momentum sustains the victory longer. Momentum allows you to be successful for a longer period of time. An expression they use in the sports world, and you've all heard it, is when a team has got momentum, the sportscasters will say something about like they're playing over their heads. What's it mean when they say they're playing over the heads? What it really means is they've got momentum going for them. And when they've got momentum going for them, things begin to turn out great. And here's why, in your notes, momentum is the great exaggerator. In other words, momentum takes what is and exaggerates it. Stay with me in your notes. Momentum makes leaders look better than they are. That's why I call it a leader's best friend. In other words, think about it for a moment. Just stop for a moment. When you've got momentum, people think you're better than you really are. And isn't it fun to be a leader and have your people think you're really better than you really are? You know, and they're just saying, oh my goodness, you know, what a leader. And you realize that you're not quite that good. Now, you don't want to stop the momentum and tell people that. But it's a great exaggeration. It makes the leader look better than he or she is. And momentum makes followers perform better than they are. It allows followers to perform more than them. So what you always want to do is you always want to have momentum, because momentum is the leader's best friend. Now let me just do the reverse for this for a moment. When you have no momentum, or you have negative momentum, remember Paul Harvey is one who said, you can tell you're on the road to success. It's uphill all the way. So every once in a while I run to people and say, you know what? This is just great. We're just. It just seems like everything's coming automatically. Well, that means they're going downhill, and it's only a matter of time. Now, let me tell you something. When you lack momentum, just as positive momentum exaggerates things in a positive way, negative momentum exaggerates things in a negative way. So, no momentum makes leaders look worse than they are, and no momentum makes followers perform worse than they are. In other words, momentum is the great exaggerator. If you've got it, you look better than you really are. If you don't have it, you look worse than you really are. Now, what I want you to understand about momentum is this. With momentum, it takes less energy to solve problems. What discourages organizations more than anything else is problems. What discourages people more than anything else is problems. And so what happens is that when problems begin to bog you down, it seems like momentum begins to ebb. Now, the reason for that is the fact that the problem becomes bigger than the momentum instead of the momentum becoming bigger than the problem. So let me explain to you the difference. Here's the difference. What I have found in teaching leadership is this. Managers deal mostly with problems. That's just the nature of who management is. They deal a lot with problems. And nothing wrong with that, because you got to deal with problems. Where management deals with problems and works on problems, what I found is leaders, they work on momentum. Leaders know that if they can create momentum, many of the problems they have in their organization will be solved. Let me explain to you what I mean. Here we go. A train going down the track, 55 miles an hour. I mean, that train just come. A train going down the track 55 miles an hour can crash through a 5-foot thick concrete wall, steel reinforced. It'll crash through that concrete wall and just keep on going. Why? Because it has momentum. It's moving down the tracks. A 5-foot thick concrete wall, steel reinforced, can't stop that train because it has momentum. That same train stopped dead on the track without any momentum at all. You can put a 1-inch block in front of the driving wheels, and that same train that could crash through a 5-foot thick concrete wall, steel reinforced, that same train with a 1-inch block in front of its driving wheels cannot even get started.
So
This is a huge example of momentum. It works the same in companies. If you've got momentum in your company, you know what you can be doing if you've got momentum? You can smash through a 5-foot thick concrete wall, steel reinforced problem, and keep on going. If you don't have momentum in your company, you know what happens? I can promise you, if you don't have momentum in your company, there could be a 1-inch problem, and you can't even get started. That's why I tell people all the time, your problem is not your problem. In fact, the problem is, people think the problem is the problem. And the problem is not a problem, but because you think the problem is the problem. You work on a problem that's not a problem, and the problem wasn't a problem, now becomes a problem, not because it was a problem, but the problem is you didn't know the problem was a problem, so the problem that was a problem has become a problem because you didn't know the problem was a problem. So now you have a problem that wasn't a problem, that is now your problem because you didn't know the problem wasn't the problem. So melancholic in the back is raising her hand saying, John, could you repeat that one more time? I didn't quite get all of that. Now, here's what I'm saying, very simple. You can either spend your life working on problems, or you can spend your life creating momentum.
that's right.
If you're going to be a leader, you're going to create momentum, I guarantee. You're going to create momentum because you know that momentum will solve almost all of your problems. Here's the way this works. Momentum will solve your problems. But if you deal with problems, you'll never get momentum. So you've got to get on the momentum side. And leaders understand that. Leaders realize that you've got to work on momentum. If you want to be successful, you've got to work on momentum. That's just where it is. So, because see, there are two kinds of people, and this is so important. It's in your notes because I want you to be sure to get it. There are two kinds of people. First of all, leaders are like thermostats. They control the temperature. And followers are like thermometers. They record the temperature. And you got to ask yourself the question, am I going to set the temperature? Am I going to create momentum as a leader? Or am I basically going to go around and record what the temperature is like most followers? And this is a very important issue. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about if momentum is so important because it helps solve most of the problems in the organization, how do I, as a leader, create momentum for my company? How do I create it for my department? How do I create it for my organization? How do you move the big mo? In the Laws of Teamwork book, one of the 17 laws of teamwork that I write about is the law of the big mo. I talk about morale. I talk about high morale. And you know what I say about high morale? When you're winning, nothing hurts. Isn't that the truth? When you see a team winning, you don't see a team walking slowly off the football field. Oh, it was a rough game. No, they're jumping up and down. They're excited. You know why? Because they got the big mo. They've got momentum. When you're winning, nothing hurts. Can I tell you something? When you don't have momentum, it works like this. When you're losing, everything hurts. Isn't that the truth? So how do you move the big mo? How do you get it going? Number one, understand its value. Understand the value of momentum. As a leader, you've got to understand, and the best way I can explain it, if you'll let me use a sports analogy again, what happens to coaches? Well, let's say, for example, I'm coaching and my team is losing, and all of a sudden we've lost momentum, and the other team is pouring up just pouring on the points. Okay, what do teams that are losing momentum? What's the coach do when the team starts losing momentum? Calls timeout. Now, why did the coach call timeout? Very simple. They realized that momentum is getting away from them. I wish every leader would understand what a coach understands. When you're losing momentum in your organization, call timeout. It's time to huddle. It's time to talk about the issues. Don't put your head in the sand and act like it's not happening. Say, look, we're not doing well. Let's talk about it. Let's turn this around. Let's get the big move going for us. So, number one, understand its value. Number two, figure out what the motivating factors are in your organization. Just figure them out. There are certain things in your organization that motivate your people. If you say, as a leader, I don't know what they are, it's very simple. Ask your group. Get to your team. If this is my leadership team, I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, okay, let me ask you a question. What motivates you? What really gets you excited? What gives you energy? They're going to tell you. They'll tell you what motivates them. They'll tell you what momentum they need in their life. to go forward. So figure out the motivating factors. Number 3, remove the demotivating factors in your organization. Now, we just did the opposite. You're feeding in the motivating factors. For example, I may be talking to my team. And what's your name? John. I may be talking to my team and I say, okay, John, let me ask you a question, John. What demotivates you? And John might say, you know what? In our company, it takes too long for me to get an answer. And 3 weeks ago, I want to know about something. I'm still waiting on the answer. All the bureaucracy and all the stuff, all the paperwork. I hate that stuff. And so I said, okay, John, one of your demotivating factors, obviously, is bureaucracy and too much paperwork. So what do I do as a leader? I say, okay, let's see how we can give you direct lines so you can get your answers. Okay, what I'm saying is leaders instill motivating factors to get the momentum going, and they remove demotivating factors. Number 4, schedule times for direction and celebration. In other words, when you win, have a party. And when you have the party, always give them direction for the next step. One of the greatest mistakes I find in celebrating is too many organizations celebrate and it's just in the end of itself. When you have a party over a victory, at the end of that party, say, you know what? Let me share with you where we want to go next. Always give direction at your celebration times. Always say, this is our next level. This is where we're going to go. Because the people already have momentum. They feel they can win. They feel successful. They feel good about themselves. They've got a victory under the belt. That's the time to give them the next challenge. Number 5, recognize and honor people who move the ball forward. Very simply put, find the people who move the ball forward, give them the credit, recognize it, get them up in front of the people. Very important. By the way, if they're not moving the ball forward, don't applaud. It amazes me in so many organizations how we affirm people that aren't doing a good job. You've never seen a coach, when a ball player fumbles, stand on the sidelines and clap and say, that's a way to go. No. So you recognize and affirm those who are doing the job. And number 6, practice what I call character leadership. And I would define character leadership this way. Character leadership is when I lead with enthusiasm and hope, and the future doesn't seem very bright. In other words, the average person, when things don't look good, they sag. Leaders, they suck it up and move forward and get positive, and they lead whether they feel good or not. Quit waiting to feel good to lead. Quit waiting for your first victory. If you've had a loss, put it behind you. Keep going. Have character leadership. Understand that as you go, so will the team go. Law number 17, the law of priorities. The law of priorities says that leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. So let's talk about that for a moment. Activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Some of these laws I do better on than others. There are some laws that I excel more than others. I want to just say that probably of the 21 laws, this is my best law. I really do understand the law of priorities. And so let me give you a little bit of background. I'm working on a business degree in Indiana back in 1971, 72 in college. And I read in a textbook about the Pareto principle. A guy named Alfredo Pareto. It was the first time that I ever was introduced to what is known sometimes as the 80-20 principle. The first time that I've ever was introduced to it, and basically Pareto taught in that one paragraph in that book about priorities. And I remember reading that paragraph and saying to myself, this is very important to me. I need to learn priorities the way Pareto taught them. And so I became a student of Pareto. I became a student of priorities. And that was, my goodness, that was well over 30 years ago. And I can tell you that when people look at what little things that I've been able to accomplish, and they come and say, how can you accomplish so much? I can always tell them with great integrity, this law right here, the law of priorities, I have worked on and I have excelled in. So let's look at your notes, because this is a terrific law to teach. I've already got a diagram for you. So let's just look at the diagram for a second. On the left-hand column is priorities. And by the way, since I'm doing some teaching on this, I want you to put a slice there, and I want you to also put the word people. Because I'm going to teach you priorities, but I'm also going to teach you how to prioritize your people in about 5 minutes. So, but for now, the left-hand column is priorities, and the right-hand column is production, and it pretty well explains itself. Here's what Pareto says. Pareto says that if you have 10 things to do, and you prioritize those 10 things correctly, if you only do 2 of them, but you do the top 2, you're going to get an 80% return on everything you need in your life. It's very obvious. You do 2 things, you go to the production side, 80% return. That's huge. Pareto goes on and says, let's say instead of doing the top 2 things, you do the bottom 8. You ignore the top 2. The most important things you ignore, and you do the bottom 8. Here's what Pareto says. If you do the bottom 8, if you go to the production side, you can see you're only going to have a 20% return. That's why it's sometimes called the 80-20 principle or the 20-80 principle. It's really talking about how to prioritize your life. And Pareto says, if you prioritize your life correctly, if you do just the 2 things out of 10 that you need to do, the most important 2, 80% of everything you want in your business, I can tell you this works in your family. If you prioritize your family time right, 80% of everything you need in your family, it's going to happen if you understand how to work the top 20%. What I have found is most people don't understand the 20-80 principle, and so therefore they don't put the time, energy, and effort in the top 20%, so therefore they don't get the return. Now, this is a great principle, but there are 3 questions, priority questions, that you need to ask yourself, that I need to ask myself, that helps me to establish this top 20%. Question number 1, requirement. I've got to ask myself, what is required of me? In other words, I've got to look at my job. I've got to look at my company, my organization, the one that I work for. There are certain job descriptions, there are certain requirements of the job. And I got to basically say, okay, what do I have to do? Because whatever I have to do, I have to do it. If I don't do those, I'm fired. So it's got to be a priority. True? So I got to ask what's required of me. The second word is return. I've got to look at all the things I do, and I have to ask myself this question, what gives me the greatest return? The third word is reward. I have to ask myself the question, what gives me the greatest reward? Now, those 3 questions I have found to be huge in understanding the 20-80 principle. But Alfredo Pareto says that if you prioritize your life correctly and you do the top 20%, you get an 80% return. And in that top 20%, I have to have those 3 R's. What's required of me? What gives me the highest return? What gives me the greatest reward? See, I've got to ask the requirement question because if I don't do that, well, then I'm out of a job. I've got to ask the return job question because if I don't do that well, I'm not going to produce. And I've got to ask the reward job because if I don't like what I'm doing and I continually do it, it's only a matter of time till I'll quit. Requirement, return, reward. Let me illustrate it. I only have 4 things that I have to do. In fact, when I tell people I only have 4 priorities, they look at me, they just kind of look at me and say, what do you mean you only do 4 things? What I mean is I only do 4 things. They say, well, no, I mean, don't you do other things? No, read my lip. Now, the reason I only do 4 things, so a lot of reasons. One is I understand priorities. Number 2 is I'm kind of worthless in most things in life. It's just a gift, so it's not yours, so don't worry about it. Okay, but worthless I am. But the 4 things I do very well. And my whole team understands this. And they do everything around me so that I can stay focused on these 4 areas because these 4 areas bring a huge return to me and to my companies that I have. So let me give you the 4 things. I'm only giving you these 4, not because these are going to be your 4, because they're not going to be. But you're going to have to go through the process, which literally took me months to go through, until you can settle in what your strengths are, what you need to be spending your time with. My 4 priorities, very simple. Number 1 is leadership. I lead well, so I spend a lot of time leading. It's a gift, and I know it. Number 2 is communication. I do it almost every day. I speak places. I lecture. I teach. I do a lot of communication. Why? Because it's a strength. The third is create or /write. I spend a lot of time creative thinking. I spend a lot of time in writing. Again, why? Because it's a strength of mine. I love to write books so that I can add value to people that I'll probably never meet. And the 4th area is in networking or relationships. Now, those are the 4 things I do. I either lead, communicate, create, or relate with other people. Those are the four things. I don't do anything else. You say, John, why don't you do anything else? Because I'm not any good at anything else. You've got to play to your strengths, not to your weaknesses. It's very important for you to understand. Listen to me carefully. People don't pay for average. They haven't paid for average in your life. They're not going to pay for average in my life. People don't pay for average. So quit trying to be average. Find out what you do well. Stay to your strengths, because that's the ace. That's what's going to bring you home. Now, these four areas, these are the four areas I stay in. I don't do anything else. Now, I have to have a lot of things done, so I have players around me that they complete me, and they do things for me that are huge on the team, that are vitally important. Now, I'm not saying these are the only four important things. I'm just saying, for me, these are the four things that I do, and these are my four top priorities. These give me the greatest return. These give me the greatest reward. You see, what Pareto is teaching you and me are the following lessons. He's teaching us, first of all, it's not how hard you work, it's how smart you work. He's teaching us that it's not how much time you put in the job, it's how you prioritize the job to be effective in it. He's teaching us things such as organize or agonize. In other words, get your act together and get organized, or you're going to always be behind the eight ball and you're going to be agonizing because you're trying to always catch up. He's saying things such as choose or lose. Either you choose your priorities or you'll lose your priorities to somebody else that will choose them for you. The question is not will your calendar be full. The question is who will fill your calendar. He's saying things like evaluate or stalemate. Evaluate your priorities on a consistent basis, or if you don't, you're going to plateau, you're going to stalemate before long. Now, before I close this incredible law of priorities, let's go back to the diagram one more time. I want you to, instead of looking at priorities on the left-hand column, I want you to look at people. I wish I had 30 minutes to teach this part of the lesson. I'll try to do it in 30 seconds. If you have 10 people in your organization, or let's say you have 100 and each number represents 10. Here's what Pareto says. If you have 100 people in your organization, if you prioritize them according to effectiveness in your company, 20 of those 100 people would be giving you an 80% return on everything you need in your organization. And the other 80 would be giving you a 20% return. And what Pareto will be saying to you and me as leaders is, you better prioritize your people. And what he would be saying is, once you prioritize them according to effectiveness, here's what Pareto would say. He would say, spend 80% of your time with the top 20% of your people, because that's where the return is. Let me tell you what our biggest mistake is as leaders. I see it happening all the time. Instead of spending 80% of our time with our top 20%, do you know who we spend 80% of our time with?
Lower 80%.
The bottom 20%. Because they've got questions and they want help and they've got an alley and oh, it's tough. We say, well, the top 20%, they don't need my time. The bottom 20%, they need your time. Listen, you've got to decide whether you're going to be a counselor or an equipper. If you're a counselor, you're going to work with the bottom 20%. If you're an equipper, you're going to work with the top 20%. If you're a counselor, you're going to work on the weaknesses of people. If you're an equipper, you're going to work on the strengths of people. And I'll discuss that in another law coming up. Well, the law of priorities is absolutely huge. Basically, Pareto says, get your act together. Prioritize your life, prioritize your people, prioritize your time, and give 80% of the time to the top 20%, you'll get a huge return.
Okay, I want to talk about that. That's probably the last one we'll listen to tonight, but I want to talk about that concept for just a minute. As it applies to ministry. Here it is as it applies to ministry. It's very true. Most pastors spend 80% of their time with the lowest 20%. Why? They're the ones needing help. They're the ones crying. They're the ones that are really never going to change. I mean, they are to some degree, but they're hurting. So as a pastor with a compassionate heart, we tend to focus all our time there. When in reality, we ought to be focusing on the top 20% and equipping them. What does Ephesians 4 say? To do the work of the ministry, to edify the body of Christ. Now, what we're going to be thinking about, those of us that have been in ministry, is if we pull away from that lower 20% and start focusing and spending time with the top 20%, what's going to happen? That lower 20% is going to start crying. They're going to start complaining because they're going to say that you have no time for me anymore, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to fulfill God's mandate that the people in the fivefold ministry, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, are to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, we're going to have to make that switch. And the only way you can effectively make that switch is to stand before the people and tell them what you're doing. Don't just start doing it because it's going to blow up in your face. You stand up in front of them and you tell them what you're doing, and this is how you're going to say it. We have a problem in our church. And the problem is there are a number of hurting people and a number of hurting families. And I only have so much time and so much energy. And I'm not complaining, but I'm getting burnt out because I don't have any more time and any more energy to give, and there's still all these needs. So I'm making a change in the way I'm doing things. Those that I've been meeting with for a while, you're not going to see me for a while. Because I'm going to start spending my time with people in our body who have gifts to teach and gifts to minister, and I'm going to start equipping them and training them to minister to the needs of the body. And when that is accomplished, there will be enough people and enough time in order to minister to the needs of our body. So you're going to have to work with me here and realize that I'm not working against you. I'm trying to accomplish something for you. Does that make sense? You're telling them ahead of time. Now, is that going to eliminate all the whining? No. But at least it's going to eliminate some of it, and they're going to know what's coming. But that 80-20 principle, it works in every area. 20% of the people in the church give 80% of the money. 20% of the people in the church do 80% of the work. Okay? And so we need to be ministering more effectively to that 20% so that we can train them and equip them to minister to the other 80%, which we can't get to as leaders.
So it's all about it's all about our influence, right? Because if you influence me and I influence another group member.
Yeah, we're influenced, but equipping.
Yeah.
Developing. Okay, it's all about developing and equipping. That's what Ephesians 4 says my job is to equip people to do the work of the ministry so that they can edify the body of Christ till we can all become perfected. Okay?
It's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah. And so we have to realize that that's part of the process. Okay, really our time is about up, but I want to talk about a few things. It's hard to believe that another module is about over with. Let me share with you that next week is the exams. And then we start the following week our next module, which is the first class is eschatology, which is end times events. And the second class is prison epistles. And so it's going to be a fun time. My wife will be teaching eschatology. She's excellent on end time stuff. And she'll be teaching that, and I'll be teaching the prison epistles. But next week are the exams. And for this class, there is no study guide. Here's what before I do that, we got through 17 of them. 18 is sacrifice. You've got to give up to go up, give up to go up. Number 19 is timing, the law of timing. And the law of timing says when to lead is as important as what to do and where to go. Knowing when to lead is as important as what to do and where to go. Number 20 is the law of explosive growth. To add growth, lead followers. To multiply, lead leaders. And then number 21 is the law of legacy. A leader's lasting value is measured by succession. Okay? Now, if you'd like to, first of all, you've read those in your book. And you need to read all these laws in your book and underline. But if you want to finish listening to those, you see on the screen the YouTube video that these last ones are on, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, number 3. And you can listen to them if you want to. Here's how you need to prepare for next week's exam. Go to the table of contents in your book, because there's 21 questions on the exam. And the 21 questions have to do with the name of the law and the main concept of that law. So in other words, what you want to study is you want to study, in the table of contents, the law of the lid. Leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. You want to see that number 2 is the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. You don't need to know the number, what number it is. You need to know the law, and you need to know the main concept that's right underneath it. You see, it's right there. And you're just going to mix and match. And then on top of that, there are going to be 3 or 4 questions, but they're not questions you can study for. There'll be questions such as, of the 21 irrefutable laws, which 2 or 3 are you strong in, and which 2 or 3 are you weak in, and why? Things like that. So there'll be applicable questions, not necessarily informational questions. So the informational ones are those 21 questions, the name of the law and what the main theme of the law is. And then the other questions are applicable questions. So it's going to be a very easy exam. What I think I will do for those of you that are in class here, I do know that there's a big event going on here next Tuesday night. I think it's the kickoff of the young adults. So what we're going to do is, I don't know what time that starts. 6, 6:30? Does anybody know? But what we're going to do is we're going to, in fact, we could even, if you guys can't get here any earlier, can you?
I could. I probably could.
Maybe we'll start at 5. And we'll have the first exam, which isn't going to take very long. The leadership exam won't take very long. And then go right into the other exam. So that, what time?
7.
Oh, it starts at 7. So if we made 5, we'd easily do it by 7. Why don't we just say we'll meet at 5 next week here, and those coming here. And how about you, John Moore? Is 5, that'll work? Okay. Yeah, we'll start a half hour earlier, and that way it'll. And so we'll just do the one exam, and then you can go right into the other one and just work on them and get them done. And that'll be our plan for next week. So that being said, study for your exam. And those of you that cannot be here, that are online, I'll send it to you. And but any that can be here, it helps for you to be here. Okay, and we'll start that at 5 o'clock next Tuesday night because of that other event. And then the next week we'll start off with eschatology and prison epistles. And any questions?
Hard to believe
it's almost over again, right? Okay, I think we're done for this evening. So God bless you. I'm going to, for those of you online taking the next class, I'm going to try to render this recording. So I'll log off, and then I'll log back on for the next class at about 7:45. Okay? Bless you, everybody.